Switch.
All right, let's start getting back at it, folks. I'm running a minute behind.
I did have a text with David Dove today. I was just trying to check in and see. Hey.
Same thing we're saying. We're not messing with the trout stream.
I like it. So it's just been posted on.
The next speaker is Mr. Kafsky. If you could make your way to the podium. No, I'm trying to stay away from the
Cart. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna see y'all at Harvest Festival. I'll send it over to you. Well, what do you think? The list. Yeah. I appreciate you.
Mr. Kafsky, Chris Kafsky.
All right.
I'll circle back to Mr. Kafsky in case he's grabbing lunch. All right. Oh, I think it bears mentioning again to stress to the folks here is that because of your strong delegation and Representative Victor Anderson and Senator Bo Hatchett, that's the reason the committee came here to hear you out and hear this community out. As far as I know, the Sequoia has never been deemed non-navigable. And so that... excuse me. Never been deemed navigable. Navigable. I was about to get shot. Never been deemed navigable. So these private property owners, you have been good stewards of the Sequoia. You have built a business and a community around this river. And the expectation of this committee was to hear exactly what we've heard so far from the private property owners. And it wasn't the intention of this committee to come here and this be a precursor to the taking of property rights and private property rights. It was just to hear you out and hear your opinions out. And for everybody that spoke so far, I really appreciate the insight. So let's move on here to Rob Benison, the Sequoia. It's a Sequoia River property owner.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments just immediately preceding me coming up here. I do appreciate it. Thank you to the committee for granting me time to speak at this hearing. My name is Rob Benison. I own land on the Sequoia River, and today I'm representing the more than 12 landowners in Fenwick Wood, a neighborhood just north of the north side of Clarksville on the Sequoia. To be transparent, although my comments today are as a private landowner, I'm also a longtime member and current board member of the Sequoia River Watershed Association. I'm not going to repeat what Brad Coppedge said earlier, but I do agree with what he said and would ask you to take that into serious consideration. It happens to be the only conservation organization dedicated specifically to safeguarding the Sequoia River and its watershed. This river was a dirty mess not too long ago. And as Brad detailed, a lot of effort went into cleaning it up, and it is a much cleaner, healthier river today, but it's fragile and it's rather small. And in light of continued growth in the area, it is something that we as private landowners take very, very seriously to try to maintain its pristine nature. To be clear, we at Fenwick Wood do not believe that the definition of a navigable stream, which is one of the main points that you're looking at, under current Georgia law is confusing, ambiguous, or otherwise in need of change. If you file a report with the Georgia House, we do not believe that this committee should make a recommendation for legislation, much less legislation that concerns the definition of a navigable stream in Georgia. That current definition largely rests on a waterway's suitability for transporting freight, which in no small part is a function of a river's size. Importantly, the statute clarifies that mere rafting or use of small boats to transport does not render a water navigable. All other waterways are non-navigable. The Soquih is small and has always been considered non-navigable. Thank you for the clarification a few minutes ago. There is no reason to make revisions to the term navigable that would change that status. This is not the Flint River. This is not the Chattahoochee River. And with respect to the northern sections of the Chattahoochee, which mirror the smaller streams in North Georgia, I also have property down in the Atlanta area, and it is a vastly bigger, vastly different river. And it would be a mistake for us to be categorized in the same way. The Soquih is a Georgia treasure. Arguably, it's the finest trout stream in the entire Southeast and a destination for many out-of-state anglers. It is a trophy stream managed, conserved, and maintained overwhelmingly by private landowners and private funds, despite public access points and the efforts of the DNR. It is also a much cleaner river today than in the past. Private conservation efforts, which you've heard some of today, the SRWA projects and others have improved the habitat and water quality, but it is a fragile system. It is worth pointing out that of the over 4,000 miles of trout streams managed by the state, I'm aware of only 2.5 miles that is managed as a trophy trout stream. That would be Duke's Creek, located in Smithgall Woods, just south of here. That creek is 100% within state park and open to all members of the public. Importantly, even though the state is aware that maintaining a trophy stream requires substantial resources and strict management or it'll be lost, the state has rangers there every day. It requires reservations to fish. It only permits fishing 3 days a week, and it limits it to 20 anglers. That is to maintain a stream that's analogous to the 29 miles that we have on the Soquih. If the Soquih to be reclassified or redefined as navigable, its status as a fly fishing destination holding trophy fish would be lost. There is no way the state can or would devote the necessary resources to manage 29 miles of a trophy stream in a way that would preserve it. I can assure you that private resources to support those efforts would dry up as well. For years, landowners adjacent to the Soquih have paid a premium to buy on this particular river. A change in status will diminish that value by both a compensable taking, in our view, and by reduced market and taxable values. Inevitably, small local communities such as Clarksville will lose already strained tax revenue. In the past 20 years, the owners of Fenwick Wood have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to preserve or restore riverbanks from erosion, to maintain fish stocks, and to keep the river clear of trash and debris. Many other owners up and down the river, many of whom you've listened to already today, have done the same thing. If reclassified, the Soquih would represent less than 0.5% of the miles of trout stream that the state currently manages. There is no way the state would ever manage or invest in this river in such a way as to preserve its status as a world-class trout fishing destination. Whatever small part of the licensing revenue the state allocates to stocking the Soquih is pennies compared to the annual private investment for the betterment of the river, the surrounding ecosystem, and the species living in and around the river. That annual private investment will go away if the Soquih is defined as navigable. The economic impact locally, which again has been alluded to multiple times and I won't go on and on about, would be material. And the impact to this fragile and special river would be irreversible. The Soquih is unique and special, but just one of many smaller streams in North Georgia that would be devastated by a change to the definition of navigable streams. The potential unintended consequences of such a change should be considered and studied in detail before making any changes. Any perceived gains from broadening the definition are likely to be far outweighed by the negative impact on the rivers themselves, property values, and the surrounding businesses and communities that rely heavily on the economic model that functions very well today. If this committee decides to file a report with the House recommending legislation affecting the term navigable stream, I would urge that the committee rely on objective, measurable criteria for classifying a waterway as navigable or non-navigable. The width, depth, water volume as a mean during normal years or certain times of the year may be useful, they may not. How, where, and when to measure are important details to be considered and assessed before recommending any changes. Data over time. Again, we believe the definition is clear and unambiguous as it is. For the reasons I've detailed and for the many reasons you have and will hear later today, we recommend no changes. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Benison.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Jimmy Harris, Unicoi Outfitters.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with everybody today. One of the hazards of being further down the list of speakers is that Mark Alley and Marty Simmons have already covered everything that I planned on covering this morning. I think Mark actually had my notes. He was so dead on. But one of the things I do want to just restate here is I can promise you that just about everyone in this room, if not everyone in this room, is concerned that the idea of a stream belonging to the public is going to take over, particularly here in North Georgia. I don't think all streams should be dedicated this way as non-navigable or private or whatever. I happen to live on the Chattahoochee River just downstream from where the Sequoia comes into the river. If I got together with my neighbor across the river, which is about 200 feet away, and said, hey, if you tell them you own to the middle and I say I own to the middle, and we do, let's shut this section off. I think it would just create untold havoc. I think what I want to encourage you to do is look at the history of what has been done in an area. On the Flint River, Yellow Jacket Shoals has been open to people floating through there for decades. In North Georgia, it's not the same way. The streams are much smaller, they're much shallower. But I can tell you, being in the retail fishing business, we have a lot of people come by our shop who think they have a right to go anywhere up here. And if nothing else, I want to applaud you and say that I support you just to get this issue resolved so we don't have to argue it anymore. The one thing that I disagree with Mark Alley about is he says he doesn't have any problem with trespassers and poachers on his land. We happen to lease 1.5 miles of the Chattahoochee River immediately downstream from the city of Helen. We probably have more people arrested every year than every other private stream owner in the state because we're right there in view of the public. There's a lot of misinformation about what you can and cannot do out there. And those same people are going to come to Marty and Mark and Bear and everybody else on the Sequoia, and they're going to start saying, no, you can't keep me off now. This is public. It's public property. So I just want to encourage you to consider the history. I want to reiterate what several other people have said. There are between White County, Habersham County, and Rabun County, there are a minimum of 5 retail stores that cater specifically to anglers coming to these streams. The amount of revenue contributed to the local economy, I think I counted there were 14, at minimum there are 14 private venues on the Sequoia River. We have venues on other streams, on the Hiwassee, on the Chattahoochee, on the Chestatee. If you take all of those together, I promise you the contribution to the local economy in this area is millions and millions of dollars. And these have been built up over the years because of the fact that it was known to be private and could be managed as a private enterprise. And not 100% of the private landowners take good care of their land, but the overwhelming majority of them do, because it's a source of income for them. One of the most proud things I've ever done in my life is provide some of these private landowners with a way to avoid cutting their farm up into 1 acre lots and selling them off. I can help them by providing them with a resource that can help them pay their taxes and maintain the property. And I just want to encourage you to not, I don't want to sound prejudiced on this, but I think a lot of the issue is that there are millions of Georgians that live in large metropolitan areas. And not only do they have much exposure to this wonderful natural resource that we have here, but a lot of them don't own private property. And just, they can't fathom the attitude that they can't just go wherever they want to. I think that's one of the problems with the litter issue. Sorry, Atlanta. But in Atlanta, if they throw their beer can on the sidewalk, someone comes along, someone is paid to come along behind them and pick it up and throw it in a trash can. It befuddles my mind how somebody can litter on the Sequoia River or the Chattahoochee River or the Toccoa River. Those magnificent resources that people literally do come from around the world to experience fishing here. And so again, I thank you for the opportunity, and I want to make sure that everyone on this committee understands that at some point you're probably going to be blindsided by a group of people that thinks they should have unlimited access because it's a stream. Thank you very much.
Nolan Glenn. Nolan Glenn.
Good morning. My name is Nolan Glenn, and I'm currently a business professional in the commercial insurance industry, but I'm also a fly fishing guide who has traversed many of the rivers.
Mr. Glenn, will you speak into the mic a little bit?
A little bit more? How
There
about
you go.
that?
Yes,
Better?
sir.
Okay. My name's Nolan Glenn, and I am a business professional in the commercial insurance industry, but I'm also a fly fishing guide, and I'm born and raised here, and I've traversed many of the streams and rivers and lakes in this state for my whole entire life. And through fly fishing and guiding fly fishing, it's actually how I paid for the majority of my college tuition and education. I'm an avid outdoorsman, and I've been fishing this state my whole entire life. And my family owns property in Oglethorpe County that has also been in our family since the 18th century, which gives me a further vested interest in this topic. Upon hearing the details that led to the proposal of SB 115, I was taken aback by the ingenuity of the strategic plan. The first part of the plan was to use the Flint River crisis as a means to introduce SB 115 into the state congressional floor, a bill which now has deeply embedded the public trust doctrine into Georgia law for navigable waterways. If assuring public access to navigable waterways was the only focus of the bill, then SB 115 would have been sufficient and HR 519 would not be necessary. In fact, we the people were reassured on multiple occasions that HR 519 had nothing to do with private property rights. Instead, the formation of this study committee was strictly in regards to clarification for DNR officers. However, when you read HR 519, the true nature and scope of the bill is revealed. In reality, the study committee performs no such studies on navigable waterways. In fact, HR 519 clearly states on line 34 that the proposed purpose of this committee is to study fishing access on non-navigable streams. To clarify, the term non-navigable encompasses every potential stream and creek located on private property in Georgia. If there is still any doubt regarding the intent being clarification or expansion of the definition of navigability, it was further clarified in the first study committee hearing in Gay, Georgia. At this meeting, the head of the DNR Fisheries for the state of Georgia publicly advocated for the expansion of the definition of navigability. I'm shocked that he publicly advocated for a definitional expansion of navigability, which would allow for the unjust taking of private property rights through the abuse of the public trust doctrine. Where does the slippery slope end if the definition of navigability is changed, regardless of if it is based on CFS, depth, or width? What would prevent the state from further expanding the definition of navigability in the future and unjustly taking the hunting and fishing rights of private landowners? I would also like to emphasize that I am an advocate and supporter for public lands and fishing rights on those lands. I have fished in public rivers from Georgia to New York and Maine, all the way out to Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana. If the state wants to expand the public's access rights to other waterways, they cannot do it by unjustly taking the hunting and fishing rights of private property owners. To expand the public fishing and hunting access, they should open another joint partnership with private landowners to build another fishery like Duke's Creek. But to do this, the state would need to fully compensate the landowners for their voluntary sale of the property and their access rights. In fact, many of the people advocating for H.R. 519 desire this committee to expand the definition of navigable for the sole purpose of seizing as much private property rights from the citizens of Georgia as possible. The broader the definition, the more private property can be taken. Why go through the arduous process of eminent domain when you can simply take people's property using the public trust doctrine? This is an unjust taking without compensation, and is a violation of the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Let me be clear, any expansion of the definition of navigability is a clear infringement on the constitutional rights of the citizens of Georgia. In fact, H.R. 519 has the potential to be the greatest unjustified seizure of private property since the Treaty of New Echota, which robbed the Cherokee Indians of their national boundaries, legalized in Georgia State Congress and Federal Supreme Court. To expand the scope of the term navigable would compel the public trust doctrine to override 2 centuries of established case law that has sided with property owners. Such actions would not only be unethical, but also purely un-American. In closing, gentlemen of the committee, I would ask you to heed the words enshrined in the banners that drape from the columns on our state emblem. Consider the proposition placed before this committee wisely. Above all else, seek to promote and preserve justice for Georgians, and in every action of government, strive for moderation. These are the founding principles of our state. Therefore, I want to ask the committee to do the opposite of what the radical proponents of H.R. 519 have asked you to do. Instead, consider strengthening the property rights for all Georgians. In conclusion, I'm asking the committee to introduce a bill that would ensure the public trust doctrine can never be utilized in the future to unjustly seize private property rights from the citizens of this great state. I say this as a Georgian with a sincere heart and dedication towards the preservation of our state, its people, and the principles upon which it was founded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. I got a question.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your passion as usual, but I assure you that I don't have as many generations back as a landowner as most of you, but mine goes back about 125 years, and we love private property rights as much as anybody. And I think that this committee is made up of people who will be fair, and we did not come to whitewash anything, but to give to the citizens of Georgia a fair and well thought out proposition of where we stand and what we've seen here. While we appreciate your dedication, rest assured that the only difference in us and you is we just happen to run for the state house.
I appreciate your clarification, y'all's time.
Thank you. All right. Next, we've got Mark Lovell.
Hello, thank you for having the time to speak up here. My family is a fourth generation landowner on the Soquee. We do agriculture as well as manage 4 miles of the river for trophy trout fishing. Over the last 40 to 50 years, we have invested countless hours and well over $800,000 of our own money to improve the habitat on this river and to make it an incredible fishery, just like many of the other landowners in this room. Like the young lady from Nuntutla, we have managed to turn what was once a muddy, messy river into now a spawning population of trout. And we're very proud of that fact. And we will do anything we need to do to protect that river. It is like a member of our family. We've been blessed to be able to keep our family farm in one piece. And I'd like to pass it on to the next 4 generations. But if any change to the navigability laws was to come about, that would make that impossible. It would also decimate this entire economy and cripple Habersham County, as many have stated earlier today. Just to point out a few historical facts, the river has never, ever, in any point, been questioned as navigable. I remember my father telling me about when he was a child in the early 1900s, they had to build a logging train all the way at the headwaters just to get the logs down to Cornelia where they could be processed, because the river couldn't float a single log, let alone a boat, a freight, or anything else. And the river is much lower now than it was when he was a child. So that's one thing. A lot of the landowners here, they have invested large amounts of money. And I dare say I have to disagree with some of the facts that was presented by the DNR as far as stocking of the river. Not a single one of the landowners here have ever had the DNR stock anything. My family has put all the fish on our property, and I think every single landowner here has done the same. So there's a questionability thing as to whether the fish belong to us or someone else, but we'll leave that argument for another day. But I implore you, leave the navigability and the definition of non-navigability as it sits. There's no question as to whether a boat of freight can float down this river. It's plain as day. And let's leave Habersham County alone so it can continue to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the next speaker here, Michael Van Winkle.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mike Van Winkle. My wife and I have got some riverfront property north of Clarksville. We love the Soquee. I'm proud that I'm the 4th generation of my family to call Habersham County home, and great place to live. We were lucky enough to find some property on the Soquee River. Part of what attracted us to that property was the fact that I could control who and what was on that river. That river is our backyard, literally. Our kids played there. Our grandkids play there now. Our son was baptized in that river. To give you an idea what that river looks like at our house, it's about 30 feet wide. There's places that are knee deep or even waist deep, but most of it's a foot deep. You couldn't get a boat up through there if you tried. I want you to think about something, guys. Why was this room full today? Why? And this is not directed at you, but there are a lot of folks out there that do not trust government. When a bill like Senate Bill 150, or excuse me, the Senate Bill 115 was passed, it started out as a, National Guard insurance bill and suddenly winds up at the midnight hour as a fishing bill I think that sort of answers why a lot of folks don't trust government. So I'm hoping that you guys will do the right thing, protect our property rights. And I realize there's a lot of folks out there that would love to fish and love to hunt on other people's property, but I'm paying taxes. I bought that property with the understanding that I could control it, and I do not want that to be changed in the future. And I'm asking you guys to help protect the other property owners throughout the whole state of Georgia. And I think you will do the right thing. I hope and pray you will do the right thing. If the navigability, I've never heard the cubic feet per second thing before. I'd never heard the width before. But obviously, there's a lot of folks that vote that would love to hunt and fish on other people's property. I get it. So it's a political issue. But just understand, you're going to be going against hundreds of years of state law, of state traditions. And again, I'm hoping and praying that y'all do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Van Winkle. I think most of the members on this committee, part of the reason they ran for government is because they had a healthy distrust of governments. So we share some of that with you. Our next speaker is Rob Kiker, excuse me. Rob Kiker.
I don't think he's here.
Okay. All right, that's okay. We'll move on. Mr. Neesmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got up at 5 this morning to come here from Oglethorpe County. My situation is different, but it's the same, just as it's been presented. But after listening to all of this, I want to remind myself of the 5 B's of a good presentation. Be brief, brother, be brief. I'm going to make this short. We have trout stream property in North Georgia. We've got Flint River property in Middle Georgia. But my home county, Wayne County, running down the side of it is the Amazon of the South, the Altamaha River. Our family, we purchased to protect and put in conservation easements so timber companies wouldn't cut cypress that were growing when Christopher Columbus discovered America. I don't want my great-grandchildren touching them. I want them to be there so that they can experience that too. We have an extensive stretch of Altamaha River. We understand that's public. We understand that's navigable, and we have no problem. But those oxbow lakes that we have miles deep in our swamp, we own both sides and the bottom of those, and we wouldn't appreciate seeing navigability change so that it would turn our private property into public property. So thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neesmith. Mr. Rutherford Seidel.
Thank you, Chairman Burkett, and thank you for the distinguished members of this committee. I think I'm not going to repeat all the good things that have been said by my friends and neighbors. My wife and I have purchased a house in the Squee. We love, and she bought it. She's not a fisherman either. She bought it because she loves the quiet enjoyment that we are guaranteed in our deeds when we buy those properties. I like to fish, and but I don't have to do it every day. It's a nice attribute. It's nice to have. I got other family that owns a lot more land near us, and we've had a very positive experience since last century. My great-great-grandfathers was, I think, the first graduating class from the Lumpkin Law School at Georgia. And I've got his diary, I've got his cavalry book, and I've got a bunch of other things, but I also know he stood for private property rights, and I got his diploma in my law office too. And so having seen, my family from Athens, spent the summers up in Rabun County. We have our houses in Rabun County also. And I know some of y'all represent those counties, and it's important. This is a statewide issue, private property rights. This is not just a Sequoia, but it's a very important issue up here because the DNR, unfortunately, hasn't put any money into it up there. It's all been about private folks doing private things. And I think the tens of millions of dollars that I've calculated that have gone into all the stories that you've heard here today, there'll have to be some sort of recompense for that. And I don't see how in the world you're going to start that slippery slope. When you go back and even just look at title policies, you know, what people paid, overpaid, I guess, if you end up having to go back and rework the valuations on your property. So I'll leave the private property issue, and I'm going to talk about something no one's talked about in any of the hearings so far. Not only am I a hunter, a fisherman, a paddler, hiker, lawyer, big Bulldog fan, I the Chattahoochee River Keeper 30 years ago. And I did it because my biology teacher told me, what are you going to do to make a difference in the state you love? And I thought, you know, this teacher touched my heart, and she told me that my body is 70% water. So we're all sitting in this room, 70% water today. We're all basically tributaries of the watersheds we live in. Everybody went to the restroom, you know what I'm talking about. And what I'm saying is whatever is in that river and that stream is what's going to be in your bodies, in your kids' bodies, and your grandchildren's bodies. I just became a granddad too, so congratulations to all my fellow grandparents. And that's personal. That's as personal as private property rights. I do share the sentiment about those fish being treated like our family members on the Sequoia, and I do also tell you that we stand at the Riverkeeper for the cleanest possible unpolluted water. Now, I know permits are issued because we have to have commerce. We have to balance conservation and commerce. But if you're doing something illegal on that river, which nobody really does is the Sequoia, it's an amazing place. If you go look and see what's happening there, you won't see the 2.5 million pounds I've overseen we've pulled out of the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper of garbage over 30 years. That's a lot of work. Thank God we got a lot of volunteers, but it's not the DNR that's doing it. It's not the state. We haven't gotten one penny from the state for doing this. I've raised all the money with a lot of development officers and friends, but start off with my first money. We're in the bottom of my dad's office, had a volunteer they lived on the Sequoia eventually after she volunteered. And I've now been through, I'm up my second Riverkeeper in 30 years, and we don't have that much turnover. If I look at the EPD, who we're actually having to replace in many ways, I see they only get about $30 million from the tight budget that Georgia's got. We've raised and we'll have to spend more of that in our 30 years, taking the Clean Water Act and using the citizens suit provision. We've never lost a lawsuit. We've won billions of dollars. We've sued the city. We put our mayor in jail. And we did that with the good folks of LaGrange, Georgia. We did it with the good folks of Noonan, Georgia, and other people downstream that had standing against the city that I paid taxes in Atlanta. And I've never been on both sides of a lawsuit. But if it comes down to private property rights being taken away from us in the Sequoia, I'll be on both sides of the lawsuit. I'll be a taxpayer, paying for the damn lawyers, I guess. And I'll be paying for it, the lawyers like I've had to do already once before in Atlanta. Told one of my neighbors, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. He was working for the firm that was representing the city of Atlanta. We won the summary judgment, by the way. That means there were no facts really an issue, just a big waste of time. They made $3 million at their law firm. We spent $300,000. That's the kind of waste that the city of Atlanta put. And I don't want to see the state do the same thing, because I assure you, as I'm standing here, everybody in this room, me leading the charge, we'll get the finest lawyers, and my record of never losing a lawsuit will be intact. Because this is clear. This is absolutely clear. So water rights are important. I oversee those out west. And I think where's the lady from the SELC? I started that organization in Georgia. I was on the board and brought it to Atlanta, opened up the Atlanta office, ended up getting off the board for other reasons because my term expired and everything else. But the only thing I have to say about her presentation earlier, and I love SELC, they do good work. But there was a bunch of states that were mentioned there, and I happen to know about them because we have some property in those states. I'm a lawyer, and I oversee the properties in those states. It was a little slight, whether she meant to or not. I want to give her a chance to do the rebuttal. But there was a little slight hint of those states don't believe that there's any compensation for a taking. That's why we got to see those states. That was the preview, in my opinion, of what we saw up there. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we looked at some of those states that were out there. Some of them were wet boot states, too. We talked about boots. So I just want to make sure that we all know what we're looking at, where everybody's angling for, and what's going to happen. Now, rest assured, at Riverkeeper, we do love for people to get out and recreate on navigable waters, and I do too. I'm a paddler, as I said before, but I also respect that the Sequoia has never been that place, and you can get shot or worse on trying to do that. I knew that as a young boy, and I think it's been the way it works up here in North Georgia, and it's worked just fine. And if you go look at, I already referenced the amount of waste that people leave behind. Unfortunately, not all paddlers are clean. I don't think I cleaned up 1 pound of garbage that was left by a bear or a deer or raccoon. No, it was all humans. And I'm not saying all humans are bad on rivers, they're not, but a few people can spoil the whole fruit bowl. You know that. So those are my main points. I want to also make mention that the Sequoia has done an amazing job of gathering up the seeps, the springs, and all the fresh water that you see that ends up coming down. If you take a look at my body, as I've referenced earlier, we're all tributaries. The capillaries that lead to the veins, that lead to the artery, the Sequoia is the capillaries. If we cut off the springs and the seeps and all those things for the headwaters, our veins will go and our artery will go and would be dead. Same thing for this river. If we don't protect the most pristine part, the most fragile part of our system here, we're going to be in big trouble. And there's a big difference between cold water fishery and a warm water fishery. Cold water fishery is very fragile. And the only one I know that's farther south than where we are, mostly is the one at the bottom of the dam at Lake Lanier. And that's there artificially because the cool water out of Lake Lanier creates a perfect place for the DNR to have their trout hatchery, which I appreciate that they've got their trout hatchery because it's great and people enjoy it and it gives the public great satisfaction and places to go. So quiet right of enjoyment is important. Private lands we talked on. I think I've covered everything I want to other than one more thing. Y'all may not be familiar with pathogenic bacteria or invasive water species, noxious aquatic weeds. We are. My family has spent lots of money. I don't want to brag, but it's because not anything to brag about, but whirling disease is alive and well in Montana. And millions and millions of dollars is going there. Other things like gill lice and other diseases are real. If you do not wash off your boots or you bring your canoe or you're kept from another place like North Carolina's got some problems and you bring it from other places, you will spread that, not meaningfully, but you will spread that and all of a sudden we'll have these same problems that these other water resources have. We don't have those problems in the Sequoia right now. It's going to be a blessing that our God-given waters up there don't ever get those problems, but it's going to be brought in by humans, I'm afraid. And it's going to be brought in through boots and through, well, you're talking about the wet boots. It's going to be brought in by just one person out of a bunch of people that don't want to take care of it. I'm sure that this community will make sure that the people that fish on their waters are going to be very careful because they know what's at stake, their livelihoods. So it's important that we figure out a way, the DNR and across the state. I've already read about, last night, stayed up and read about all the invasive we're battling already in the waterways. We've got to do better and we've got to spend more money on having places for people to go fish and hunt. This is my last comment. We are behind Florida. We're behind every other state except for Alabama. In Alabama, I won't comment on being a Bulldog fan. But I will say this, that we should not be the worst state, the second worst state with regard to our public lands, state public lands, as far as how much we have to offer for people who do want to go hunt and fish. It shouldn't come down on private property rights owners to be having their rights to be threatened or taken away. We should create I can come up with 1,000 different ways. I tried to do the transfer tax. That didn't work a while back, but increasing something, letting people at least vote on it. I guarantee if we put that out with the right verbiage, I think the people will vote for an increase on a transfer tax to create more huntable, fishable lands. And then people can be bought out at fair price if they want to sell. And that's the way to handle the pressure that is building with a population that's growing, because we're going to be back here again somewhere, some other hearing talking about the difference between the haves and the have-nots. And I don't think that's fair if we can provide, and the state should provide, more places for them to go. I did serve on the State Property Commission for both a Republican and a Democratic governor. And I was proud to serve with Sonny and Roy Barnes, and we got a lot of state acquisitions, green space bought in those years. I'd love to help serve, volunteer, do whatever to try to do it again. I also chair the Conservation Fund, which is a national acquisition of green space group. So don't get me wrong. I think that more green space would be terrific, but it just can't come at the out of the private lands group that doesn't want to sell. So thank you all so much. I appreciate your time and everything you do. I know it's a thankless job in many ways, but y'all being here and allowing us to all speak is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Next, we have Frank Dorman. Frank Dorman.
First off, I'd like to say thank you for all the work that you're doing and listening to us as we present our positions on the Sequoia River. But I'd like to start with a little story. In 1987, my wife and I were looking for some property up here in North Georgia. And we found a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lot on the Chattahoochee River. And one summer Saturday, we decided we're going to take one more look at it, and then we were going to put some money down on it. We got to the lot. We went to look at it. By the way, it's south of Helen. We got to the river, and we were just appalled. The tubers were bank to bank, the trash on the river. I mean, it was just nothing that we would want to participate in. So we kept looking, and we found a beautiful lot on the Sequoia River. Now, what we saw on the Chattahoochee made a big impact on me, because from what we saw, I realized that it was up to me, my wife, my family, to take care of our small piece of the Sequoia. We don't own acres and acres. You know, we own some, probably 500 feet on the river. So for all these years, 36 years, we've been stewards of the property that we own. And, people have talked about the fish and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to share two things. In parts of the Sequoia River, the hemlocks make a tremendous impact on the ecosystem. You may not know it, but about 20 years ago, the hemlock started to be infected with the hemlock woolly adelgid. Once a hemlock is infected, if they're not treated properly and if they're not taken care of, in 5 years, they're dead. And we have probably upwards of 300 hemlocks on our property. One of them is like that. It's got to be at least 100 years, 150 years old. And over the years, we have worked on the banks. We have worked on treating the hemlocks. And, we have done everything that we can to be good stewards to the property so that the river, the ecosystem, the fish, the wildlife are taken care of. And in all that time, somebody asked the question, did you pay taxes? Yeah, pay taxes every year. But no one ever came and said, well, here's some money to help you treat the hemlocks. Here's some money to help you take care of the stream banks. We've done that ourselves. So anyways, I think we have been very good stewards of the property, and we would like to maintain being stewards of the property. We've owned it for 36 years. We're now turning it over to the next generation, and hopefully they take it over. And there's another generation on the way that are much younger, and hopefully they will take care of it also. Now, as I was sitting here listening to, what is a navigable stream, what's river, what is not, one of the early speakers said that, they look at rivers that have 200 to 400 cubic feet per second of river flow. You may not know it, but over here in Pittsburgh and Clarksville, there's a river gauge on the Sequoia. My daughter, who was with me earlier, knows how to do this stuff. I don't. But anyways, with her phone, we went and checked to see what the gauge was. Now, we had rain last night, but the gauge was under 100 feet this morning. And I looked at the history on it, and back in 2015, the average flow of the Sequoia for the year, according to the gauge, was 149 feet per second. Some years it's higher. In 2022, it was 217 feet, but I don't believe it ever got to 400 feet per second on average for the year. Now, there's two things I'd like to ask of the committee. The first thing is that if you go that way on 115 towards Clarksville, you're going to cross the Sequoia River. I would ask that each one of you, before you leave Clarksville, cross the river and look at it and decide for yourself if you think that that is a navigable river. Now, you'll get a hint as to where it is because you're going to cross a bridge. But take a look and see if you can see the river and if you think it's a navigable river. The last thing I would like to ask you to do is that I talked about leaving our property to our next generation and the generations after that, and that's our dream. And I would really ask you that you maintain the status quo so that we can maintain our dreams. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dorman. Next, we've got Shelby Gazette. Shelby Gazette. Oh, there she is.
Good afternoon. My name is Shelby Gazetta. I'm here on behalf of Soquel River Properties LLC as my client, along with a number of other clients who own property along the Soquel. So in your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, you clarified that the goal is clarity. The purpose of this endeavor is clarity, not an expansion of rights. But I think arguably, as so many have pointed out in their testimony, this is going to lead to a lot of confusion and difficulty navigating both the law and the practice of it. So for example, and this has been mentioned a couple of times, there are no real ramps or points of access along the Soquel for long stretches that run through private property. And the Soquel is unique in that it is, as many have mentioned, very narrow and very shallow. And it is going to lead to situations where if people are allowed to, under the, are allowed to essentially pass through the water, that they will not be able to stay in it for all that long. If they enter at a public point, at some point they're going to have to leave the water. And as somebody mentioned with the youth pastor analogy, or the youth pastor story, the next point of exit that's on public property is going to be quite a ways away. It's creating an expectation that people are essentially going to have to trespass across private property in order to leave, even if they enter at a public point. And within the law, as it exists in the United States and as it exists in Georgia, that can create a certain burden on property owners. If there is this expected trespass, there are certain duties and obligations and burdens that go along with that, because there's a certain obligation to create not necessarily safe passage, but to avoid certain dangers. So it is opening up liability for the property owners along the Soquel. There's also an issue of safety. A lot of the people who own, a lot of the property owners along the Soquel engage in the regular maintenance, removing of, trees that have fallen, debris, things that create hazards. And as I mentioned, if so much of this is passing through private property, it does create an issue. If somebody is just passing along back there and it's not very open to the public, if there is a a hazard, right? A safety issue, that's going to, there's not going to be easy access to get to that person or and it's going to create a further burden on landowners to kind of even more so to monitor and to keep those areas safe. And, in addition to that as well, we do have, as we've seen, there is great owner investment in the Soquee in terms of caretaking, maintenance, water quality, all of these other things. And that comes with it a pretty heavy price. All of these people are paying property taxes, but they're also engaging very personally in pouring their own funds and time into maintaining the water. And so the question I think does remain, if that burden, or if those waters are going to be opened up, is the DNR going to step in with all of the funds and the things necessary to take on that burden from the private property owners who are currently doing that? And where are those funds? And where is the expectation that they're going to step in to essentially take over the burden from the property owners as they're going to open it up and increase that burden, essentially? Yeah, so most of my points were previously covered by all of the numerous speakers who came to speak on property rights, but thank you.
Thank you. We've got 3 more speakers. We're going to take just a 5-minute recess. We've been going about an hour now, I think. Take a 5-minute recess and we'll reconvene and do the last 3 and then close out, and then everybody can get rolling. Oh, that was Gooch's. All right. I keep blaming everybody else about these breaks, but it's really me. I've got to get up and go. Moving on to our next, we've got 3 folks that signed up today. We closed sign up yesterday, but we're going to oblige. We got Rebecca Reiser and Virginia Webb of the Chattahoochee River. You don't want to do it. She doesn't want to do it? You're good. You don't want to do it? Okay. All right. So we've got 2 more. Becky Autry. Becky Autry. All right.
We're doing good so far.
Yeah, we're clicking these off. Joe Rose, Soaring Eagle Outfitters. All right. Joe Rose.
Sorry, I've taken a lot of notes today. All right, first I want to start with, I am Joe Rose, owner of Soaring Eagle Outfitters. I'm also a fly fishing guide.
Will you pull that mic to you a little bit? There you go.
Is this any better?
Yes, sir.
All right, my name's Joe Rose, owner of Soaring Eagle Outfitters, fly fishing guide up here in North Georgia. I operate on waters here from Clarksville all the way over to Blue Ridge, covering a lot of private water. I'm also permitted through the USDA for the National Forest on public water. With all that being said, I'm also a property owner in Fannin County. I want to open this statement real quick with a quote. Mike with the Georgia Wildlife Federation opened up with a pretty good one, so I want to open up with one too. Mine is the most terrifying 9 words. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I think all of us here can tremble at those words. So the fact that someone thinks that they can come in and take over our private properties and manage those waters better than the people that are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into those fisheries is backwards. The state has had its opportunities to manage waters. Dukes Creek, Waters Creek, Nuntula Creek, all have special regulations. The only reason why Nuntula Creek still has an occasional big fish is because of our friends, the O&B at Nuntula Creek Farms. Those fish migrate, they're diploids, they breed. So they're gonna run 2 miles up till they hit a boundary, and they are caught up there in the national forest. It's rare because of the loss of fish and the loss of habitat up there over the last few years with the floods, but it still happens. The trophy fishery that Mike was talking about on public waters is probably that one, in conjunction with the Soquel, the small stretch that sits between Brigadoon and Black Hawk. The reason, again, you can go over there and catch an 18-inch trout is because of those 2 private properties, and trout do migrate. Without that, you're stuck with what we call snits, state stocked 9-inch trout. That's it. So these big public or these big private trout that are out here right now are only here because of the private property owners that are dumping $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year and have been for 30 years into this river. And it's not only this river. I'm up on the Tacoma River. I'm on the headwaters, not dam regulated, nothing. There's no DNR put in. There's USDA put in, but there's nothing from the state up there. We've put in over 30 years, probably 100 grand worth of fish, including stream restoration, removing of trees, and creating a valuable habitat for the trout. To quote my wife, I got to get my phone out so I don't mess this up with her watching.
A wise man indeed.
Oh, yeah. I've learned my lessons. All right. As she says so elegantly, a change in the definition of navigability is effectively a change to personal property rights and personal property values. While this is being prepped up for good or for public good, the approach to taking away previously established landowner rights must be fully evaluated. We pay taxes on this land at an elevated rate because we are on the river. That is in conjunction with all the money we put in yearly into stocking, feeding, running of chainsaws, hiring tree guys to remove trees because we don't want people to get injured. We do all that. The state has had its opportunity with 4,000 miles of trout water and has failed. It's great that we can go up there and catch and keep. That's what this state is. But when it comes to management, there is none. Waters is desolate, and Dukes Creek is a glimmer of what it was 10 years ago. And as I previously said, Nuntula and the public section of the Soquel is what it is today because of the private that surrounds it. 90% of my business personally is out of state, drawing them into these big trophy trout. There's nothing like it in the Southeast. You have to go out west and hope that you can catch one of these 20-inch fish, where if you go out put our properties like Mark Alley and the Simmons, you're going to have an opportunity every day, if not multiple. It's a great place to teach. And as a guide, I love to teach. I've got 5 guides working with me. You ask any one of them why we do this, and it is to teach and expand this sport. Having properties like what Mark has, Glad has, Abby has, the O&B have, what I have, it's special because we get to share that with people. We get groups from Wounded Warriors, Project Healing Waters, and other nonprofits that will come up and fish on our properties. We will also extend that to children. I love taking children out fishing. I'll take them as young as 6 years old out. Why? Because deep rooted in our sport, it's hunting and fishing. It's Georgia. We love it and want to share it with everybody. The problem with that is the private waters going away will decimate tons of jobs. For every one guide on the Flint River, I guarantee you there's 10 of them up here that'll lose their jobs because the private waters are gone. Mark Alley, Mr. Simmons, I bet you there's 10 to 12, if not 15 different outfitters that operate on their property bringing guests. I've got guests this month and next month from Austria, Germany, and Canada coming out here to fish. That says a whole lot about Georgia's fishery. So where our property rights might be a little bit different from a state next to us, we have a whole lot more to offer. As far as DNR's cubic feet per second, this 200 to 400, I have absolutely never heard of this before. I've always heard property rights as long as it extends to the middle of the river or you own both sides, which my family does. But if you were to pull up the river gauges right now through the USGS, you'll see the Soquel after last night's rain is sitting at 88 in CFS. The upper Etowah headwaters with a creek feeding in above it is sitting at 125. The Hooch and Helen is only at 46. And the Toccoa up where we're at after 2 major creeks feed in is sitting at 183 after this rain. If you want to go after DNR's rules of 200 plus, we're not there for 6 months out of the year, period. You want to look at mud right or Florida fishing rights, as was touched by the lawyer earlier. She didn't touch on mud rights. The old families down there still have mud rights and own both sides. So it's not just Georgia that has these rights. Being up on the upper Toccoa, we do deal with trespassers. We deal with littering. We deal with poaching. I call DNR. My response is that I get from them is to call the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department finds out it's fishing related. They call me call DNR. When I call DNR back, I find out their guys are at the lake and can't come out till about 9:30 or 10 o'clock that night. So we have no enforcement. We have no management to really speak of when it comes to trout fishing besides the conservation efforts that private property owners put in. I really do fear that if we were to open up fishing rights, it would probably be great for a year and a half. And after that, all these property owners that stock $20,000 or $30,000 worth of fish are going to stop because they have no benefit to doing it. There's no point. People catch and keep and it's gone. You only get 140-inch deer on your property more than likely a year that you're able to take, and then it's gone. These trophy trout are the same thing. They're grown, they're specially handled, the property is maintained. They live their life, they serve their purpose, but they're gone after they're caught and kept. I just don't understand the want or drive to take something that you haven't earned, you haven't worked towards. It's really saddening to see this. I never thought in Georgia I'd be fighting for private property rights. And as a guide, I'm hopeful that the committee will come together and do the right thing to keep all of us employed, because without the private property, you've got 6, 7 venues on the Soquel that are gone. You're going to lose all the ones in Blue Ridge, and there's probably 100 or 150 guides that are out of business. So with that, I'd like to thank y'all for hearing me out. I know I'm the last one today, and y'all are probably tired of it. But if you guys have any questions, I did leave my card. I'm happy to answer anything I can.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. I wanted to say, I'm compelled to say this, that certainly I appreciate all the members of this committee because I know their sincerity, and each one of them loves Georgia. Not as much as this Southeast Georgia Democrat does, but they do all right. But I did want to emphasize that in this state, I've served on game, fish, and parks for 20 years in the legislature. I have served, while several commissioners have gone through, but none longer than Mark Williams. And I can say this, nobody in Georgia loves this state's natural resources more than Mark Williams. And if you did not get or have not gotten a quick response to some complaints, it really needs to be charged to us because we're responsible for paying for more wardens to give where they're able to do a better job. We have not always done that. And so I take responsibility for part of it. But please don't think that it's us against them when it comes to DNR, because the things they do for this state, unheralded, like pulling somebody out of a sound when the boat gave out down on the coast, or so many other things that they do that never makes the paper. And there is a place for government, and we must have a DNR because we're all in this together. And I just don't want us to be us against them because we either rise or fall together. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Real quick,
Representative Al.
just with what he said, I'm not against DNR. I feel like they're understaffed and underpaid and underfunded. I do believe that if they had the proper funding, you wouldn't have to have commissions like this to look at private property. North Carolina is a great example of what they can do with a proper fishery. And I believe our fisheries, our public fisheries, can be the same as North Carolina, especially up in Fannin County. So with some proper regulations, with management, and with time and effort, I believe those fisheries can do very well. It's just up till now, the management has lacked on the waters that have special regulations. So that's where my viewpoint is on that. I've actually
Thank you,
never
Mr.
been
Rose.
stopped
I
by
appreciate
DNR.
you.
So,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the comments by everybody here tonight, but I want to single out one person, Scott Robertson with DNR. He came at my request, at the committee's request, to give the DNR's perspective of what they're dealing with on a daily basis. And they're not advocating to take over the Soquel. DNR is not advocating for that. And in fact, with the proposal of the cubic feet per second, that would eliminate the possibility that Soquel would even be considered for navigability purposes. So it's opposite of what has been alluded to here a couple different times. Also, I know that the DNR in our the state's portion, if I'm correct, does stock in the Sequoia. So that was said that they did not, but I'm being told that they do. So I want to thank Scott Robertson and the DNR for coming here at my request, and I appreciate everything you all do. And this is a tough situation. This is a tough issue. It's not a one-sided issue. Here, like I said at the beginning and the outset of this, here it is a with the Sequoia, it's a non-navigable stream, and it's a much clearer picture of what's happening here. You got private waters, the custom and tradition. The first time I talked to both Victor Anderson and Senator Bo Hatchett, I told him, we have to honor the custom and tradition of wherever we are. Georgia's huge. It's got different types of waterways. The Sequoia is unique. It's not like the black waters of South Georgia. It's not like the Ogeechee. It's not like the Satilla. It's unique. So we have to honor that. Here, the Sequoia has been private. I expect that that's what our recommendation out of this committee will honor that fact, that it is a private waterway. I do not expect that there's anybody on this committee that do not hold private property rights with the highest of regards. So with that said, I want to say thanks. Thanks for everyone that came out. 200 people showed up to a what is today? Thursday, 9 o'clock hearing to talk about an issue that is very near and dear to each and every one of us. This is ingrained in who we are and what we are as Georgians. So I appreciate it. Each one of these folks up here has a card and is open and available to anyone that has any other comments. I know that getting up and speaking in front of folks is not everybody's cup of tea, but you certainly have the opportunity to speak with us offline. And my card will be here, and I'll be here for a few minutes after this, and then I'm going to make it to South Georgia before.
Next step is to make a recommendation. Not a vote, a recommendation could be voted on.
So what? No. Right. Right. So.
Same way with farmland. And they got more in south than we do up here. So when we talk about what else, when you talk about the Clear River, and you talk about land prices, okay, and every time I come around and go buy something, then I can't afford it after I retire. And so, the therefore, y'all will make a recommendation amongst yourself.
We have to make a recommendation by December of what we find out of this committee. And it'll be a recommendation based on the hearings we've had in Gay, we had here, we have one up in Blue Ridge, and we've got one down in Statesboro. Well, there will be a no vote. Are you talking about a vote on the House floor for a piece of legislation, or a vote by the committee? The committee will make a recommendation after we have all the hearings. All right, do that. Well, listen, I'm going to give the opportunity for each representative to say a closing piece, and then after that, we'll adjourn.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming here today. I'm David Jenkins. I'm from south of Atlanta. The Flint River is the river in my district that my constituents have talked to me most about. And this kind of confirmed what we already knew, is that Georgia is vast. It's very different depending on where you go, from the mountains to the coast. And I'm very proud to be a part of this committee, and I look forward to finishing our study of this issue so that we can maybe make some recommendations that'll provide clarity in Georgia law so we can stop talking about this.
Amen and ditto, except for I'm not in the Flint, so I'm in Dawsonville, so I've got the Chestatee, the Amicalola, and the Etowah primarily, and obviously feeder creeks and capillaries, et cetera. I want to thank the chairman for hosting this here. And I think hopefully everyone that leaves this meeting, if this look, I've had people in my church, I'm a community banker, I've got property owners calling me asking questions because there is confusion, right? There is this assumption that other states' laws are going to encroach on what Georgia has done as a tradition or as in law. Our chairman, I heard him clearly state that there is not going to be a change to the definition of navigable waters, correct?
That is the chairman's recommendation is no change to the
That's right.
the definition of navigability.
And I don't think there's anybody on this committee, in my opinion, from what I've talked, that are going to recommend a change to that. I hope that what we can do is also provide additional information. What my takeaways are is we need to allow clarity for local sheriffs and DNR to work together when there are questions about trespass, when there's questions about people. I mean, I've got a property owner that had somebody dump not just a little bit of trash, like an entire house full worth of trash, a property. And the sheriff and DNR were having to figure out who's responsible for this because it was on, the Amclola River near it. Number two, additional funding so that DNR has the proper staff that we need to ensure that they can do the job to help make sure that the public rivers that are accessible are known to be accessible to the public so that they don't get confused and try to go onto private lands. And the last thing I would say is that the best part of this meeting is we got to hear from folks that know this community and they know what works, what doesn't work, and we can pay recognition to that. So I'm honored to be a part of this. Thank the chairman for providing that clarity, and hopefully we can continue to share that story across the state and not allow that question to be called, and that there be everyone consistent in their understanding as to what the difference between public and private water access rights are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you all. This whole discussion, the purpose for this study committee did not come about for anything related to our part of the state. It didn't come about because of anything going on in North Georgia, Northeast Georgia, the Sequee River, the Upper Chattahoochee, the Toccoa, any of the areas up here. But when I heard about it and when we got to looking at what the purpose of this study committee was, I told the chairman, I said, we've got a different situation in North Georgia. And I want to make sure that North Georgia doesn't fall victim to something that happens related to something in a different part of the state. We do not want to be an unintended consequence. And I knew that this community, I knew the people in Northeast Georgia, Habersham County, White County, Rabun County would come out and express those concerns. And the attendance of this meeting exceeded what I expected. So thank you all for coming and participating. And we appreciate it.
First, let me thank this chairman who is doing a wonderful job. And we're just kind of an example that we're not Washington, we're functional. I thought somebody was going to get that when they get home. But I want you to know that when we do sit down to bring together what we've heard from you, the citizens, and when we as a committee finally agree, and I feel certain that after we've had our say, we'll come out with most likely unanimous group together and ready to do what's best. It's been good listening to you, and you're wonderful folk. I can't understand what in the world you're doing living in the mountains, and the coast is here. But I'm very impressed with you. And Dick had the nerve to leave us and come up here, but okay. But thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I'll take a lot home with me. But always remember that there's very little that separates us. It's just a matter of listening to each other and disagreeing without being disagreeable. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to come up. Appreciate the opportunity to be on this committee. I live in Harris County. I live on the Chattahoochee River, my wife and I. Actually, it's Lake Harding, but the Chattahoochee runs through it. I'm so old, I don't do anything but fish. I don't play golf anymore. I don't hunt anymore, but I do fish a little bit as a redneck fisherman. But I'll tell you one thing. I certainly believe in private property rights because I own property myself. And I've got 8 grandsons. I hope to leave them a little bit. I don't know how you split 2 acres to eight guys, but it's going to happen somehow. But I appreciate the opportunity. I met some nice people up here today, and I really appreciate it. Gave some of you my card, and willing to talk to any of you. So appreciate it.
My hunting and fishing is done mostly on the golf course. But I understand property rights. I didn't say this before. I don't know if any of y'all know, but I was a Superior Court judge when I retired from working. So I understand the law surrounding all this. I am still worried about Senate Bill 115 and the effect it's going to have on Georgia. But I share your concerns. Most of the folks that I heard here, I share what you're telling me. So thank you, and I appreciate y'all being here to express your opinion about this legislation.
Thank you, Judge. Just appreciate everybody's input. Appreciate your hospitality and your attendance today. It's, as the chairman said, we know there are a lot of things you would probably like to have been spending your time on instead of having to be here, but it's vitally important that we hear from you. I appreciate all your time and your input and your effort and the passion you bring to the issue. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I think it's been a great hearing and you were a big part of it. So thank you very much.
Very good. With that, if there's nothing else for the good of order, then we're going to adjourn. Thank you all.